Greetings and welcome to the Quantum Ogre Cast, the topical TTRPG podcast you were destined to encounter no matter what choices you made. I am your Elder Goblin host, Jordan, and I am greeted today by a sensible ogre guest, Yochai Gall. What's going on, Yochai?
Hi, glad to be here. I'm good.
Well, I am super stoked to have you on here. We talked a little bit before the cameras, quote unquote, started to roll, but big fan of Cairn. I haven't checked out Beyond the Pale yet, but I know you've done like a dozen other adventures. I think we'll go over some of that later. But before we get started, I like to kick things off with what I call your quantum character sheet. This is a little rapid fire questionnaire, and it'll just be I'll throw them at you first thing that pops in your head, and then we'll just go from there.
Great.
All right, here we go. So, your real life alignment.
Everyone wants to say they're chaotic good. Everyone, but come on, I'm lawful good. What am I gonna do? I'm lawful good, but kind of an asshole. I don't know.
I was man, I was hoping that you were going to be our first like non-good for some reason. I don't know why. You
No,
just
who's gonna? No, evil people don't think they're evil. They,
right,
this is
right.
this is the problem. I mean, it's for me, it's really law versus chaos. The good
Yeah.
parts are irrelevant, but I'm lawful. What am I gonna say?
Yeah. Fair enough, fair enough. All right. So your non-human ancestry you relate most to.
I want to say dwarves because Jew, but I don't actually think that's true. I think if I had to really connect with like a folk element, it would be fairies, fae, but not the like a very specific kind. Like in Jewish mythology, demons and genies are kind of the same thing, and
Mm,
they're not even evil. They're sort of like they go to like temple, like they're like
yeah.
so to me, I connect more with these sort of immortal beings that don't follow the same laws as mortal people, but do have their own weird system of laws. So yeah, I would say like forest elder.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's unique. I like that one. Yeah, it's kind of it reminds me of the like what do they call in 5e like genasi? No,
Well,
that's
those
not
are
right.
more like genies. Those are more like genie. Like genasi are more like they're like a rip-off genie. Which again, the word genie is just a
Jin.
derivation of the Arabic word for a demon. Which demons have a negative connotation in the West. But in Jewish folktales, in particular, demons and spirits are basically interchangeable, and
Mm,
that's the way I see them as these sort of like beings that have their own full rich lives, aren't good or evil. They're they might be one or the other, and they don't understand mortals and vice versa. Like I like that idea. So genies is kind of a BS response, but that's sort of where I am. Genies, fairies, spirits, that kind of thing.
I actually really love that depiction too because like a lot of like what we consider like whatever demons angels have become such caricatures of characters, they're
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah well this is going to be the longest rapid fire questionnaire ever, so I'm
sorry,
going to move
sorry.
on. No,
Yeah.
you're good. I could dig into this. We could make this the topic sometime, but not today. So all right, your highest attribute.
Honestly, I think it's willpower. I think, and that's my own, but
Willpower.
well, it depends what system you're talking about. But to me,
Right.
I don't want to say charisma because I don't actually think I have high charisma, but I have high willpower, which Into the Odd Style games, charisma and willpower are interchangeable, because the focus is more on your ability to get other people to do what you want. And I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of sociopath. I'm just saying having a very strong will helps a lot, and that is my best or most useful attribute. Again,
Yeah.
not a helpful answer.
No. There's the truth to what you're saying. Gravity of personality. Whether it's presence or like you said, just straight up will, like inserting your will. So okay, on the other end, your dump stat.
Constitution. I'm just look.
Yeah.
I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. Okay, we got all kinds of problems, and we're a highly inbred population, and just the amount of genetic abnormalities and problems that I've had and my family has. It's like, man, we could not survive so much. So for me, it's Constitution.
I'm right there with you. Con is based on my medical history. Con is definitely my dump
Yeah,
stat. So
exactly. We all want to pretend we could drink poison and survive, but nah.
that's why we play dwarves, right?
Actually, dexterity is close second as a dump stat for me. I just have like the worst gross motor skills you could imagine. Uh,
That's hilarious. Okay, keeping it going.
mhm.
Okay, you're going to be a superhero based on the vibes of a monster. What monster do you choose?
Mimic.
Mimic. Oh, that's cool. I like that one. Yeah, that's a unique set of powers there. Hiding in plain sight and then just
Yeah,
super odd.
my go-to superpower is generally either polymorph, levitation, or invisibility. But I was told that folks who wanted to levitate or fly just would probably die instantly because they get hit by something or whatever. And be turning invisible, you're basically a creep. So really, what's left is polymorph. And yeah, you could still be a total creep and turn into people you're not supposed to. But for me, it's more like it'd be pretty cool to be able to just hide as a treasure chest somewhere or as a door or something, you know?
Oh yeah, that'd be so useful. Imagine playing a D&D character that could just look like anything.
I mean, it would be OP. That's what it would
Yeah,
be.
exactly. It's a great power. Okay, last one. Choose one TTRPG world that you would want to live in.
Hmm. Okay. It's sort of a cheat, but probably the Star Trek universe.
Hey, I'll take that. That's technically a
I
TTRPG.
mean, it is. I was like, well, I know that there is one. A post scarcity, fully automated luxury communism. You know, it's like, I mean, it would be for most people, the Star Trek universe would be pretty sweet, at least on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to live in an idyllic future where all, sort of issues of what you name it, like
Uh,
commercialism, whatever, are gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the the Federation is this perfect society, so they have to go and find imperfect ones to engage with in order to make conflict, because they can't have internal conflict, otherwise everything is boring. If everyone's agreeing all the time, so they created a pretty difficult situation for themselves. But I will say the best example of a Star Trek universe came from when Patrick Stewart was trying out for the role of Jean-Luc Picard in The Next Generation. They made him wear a fake hair. What is it called? A toupee. And because he's been bald since he was like 20 years old. And they were in this kind of screening room with him, and he was wearing this toupee. And one of the producers got a note from the creator of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, who said, "Take the toupee off." And the producer said, well, that doesn't make any sense. They'll have cured baldness by, the 24th century.
Mhm.
So it makes no sense that he would be bald. And then Gene Roddenberry said, in the 24th century, they won't care. And that to me is like, that's Star Trek. That's Star Trek. It's
Uh,
actually not as much about technological advancement. It's about intellectual advancement, at least
mm,
the 1960s version of it.
yeah, no, that's really interesting. I love that answer. It just goes to show that he knew his world that he was creating, right?
He was obsessed with that. I mean, it was his Gene Roddenberry had a lot of flaws, but that guy has an absolutely fascinating life. I mean, he was a cop and then a drug dealer, and then he was a pilot, and he like crashed in Morocco and led the survivors to salvation. Like that guy's life was absolutely bonkers. And then he became a writer of and basically full on like space communist and had just a nuts life. I mean, but also really tried his best to like promote women, especially women writers in his own, he was again a complicated guy, but some of the best episodes of TNG were written by women. And they have said like I was literally forced into the secretary room because I was a woman, and then he was like, no, this is a writer, put her in the writer's room. And
Mm.
I respect that a lot for the time that it came out of. Also,
Oh yeah,
he brought Leonard Nimoy to the national stage, which we, respect. I love that guy.
yeah.
So long story
Oh
short,
man,
complicated but good guy.
I need to brush up on my Star Trek history because I did not know all this about Gene Roddenberry,
I
but
mean,
that is
you gotta read his book. That's your book about him.
okay. I will look for that one. But yeah, so that's not going to be today's topic though. As
No,
we talked about
no.
Star Trek a lot actually on the last episode with Paladin Pros, ironically. But today we're going to be talking a bit about like game design, the OSR. Obviously Karen, and we're going to get into a few more heady kind of conversations about like what styles of gameplay emerge. So we'll start off with a more casual conversation and work our way up to that.
Yes, I am excited. I love theory.
Yes. Because yeah, you were talking about like some of your history with your games and stuff, and I was like, oh wait, this is interesting. I want to like.
I mean, let me tell you, I have no problem repeating myself. So,
I understand. I too am a YouTuber. I talk a lot.
yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, I have a weekly podcast, but also I do like I have a whole other side of my life that's also has me doing interviews, but not about games. And like I was on the radio on Friday, and then I have this today, and then on Thursday I have another show I'm doing. It's just like, and then I have my podcast on Wednesday. It's just like I'm just recording all the time, and I don't even know. I don't know if I've said stuff to people because I don't. I just do. I'm like, wait, did I tell you the story, or have I told that some other time? So I'm used to it.
Oh man, same thing. Yeah, you just end up kind of treading a lot of the same
Yeah.
territory, and you're like, "Wait, was it you I talked to about this?"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your other? You said you were on the radio.
Um. Yeah. So I'm very involved in the worker cooperative movement, like worker owned businesses. So um, I was the area that I live in Massachusetts. They have a radio station here. It's like their NPR, basically, whatever.
Oh, okay,
And they asked me to come on to talk about co-ops, so I did. That's all. It's not particularly interesting. I can send you the link to the. It's like an hour long, but
send it.
it's like a
I'll probably
total.
watch it.
Sure. I mean, it's radio, but
Yeah, listen.
but it was it's not the first time I've been on the radio before, and it was interesting because I the same principles apply for like podcasting. Like I knew when to like mute myself and be quiet and stuff. And the radio host was not good at asking questions, in my opinion. She was very she was just very like letting me talk too much, and I realized at
Mm,
some point she needs to interrupt me and be like, let's move on to another topic. And I thought that was interesting. Like I would not have thought of that before, but now doing a podcast for 3 years, I am more aware of that sort of thing. Of course, your mode of like laissez-faire, let's do whatever, also totally works, but not on the radio, because the radio you've really limited time. So
yeah.
anyways, long story, but
Yeah, and I can relate to that a little bit because, I typically have a different person every week. So, you kind of have to
mm,
feel it out like where do
yeah,
I need to jump back in and interject? Where do I need to leave room to breathe and,
right,
let the
right.
guests talk? And so it's a balance you have to really learn and, like anything takes a certain number of hours and experience before you really get a hang of it.
Well, that's the thing is she's been doing the radio show for 10 years. So I'm just like, okay,
Oh man.
different approaches, I guess. I mean, they do say there is a theory of interviewing where you just let the person talk as much as possible and they'll eventually say, whatever they want to say. But the difference is that kind of interviewing you do offline and then you take the best bits and string them together. That
Right.
doesn't work on the radio. We literally had between 5 and 6. That was the time, or 4 and 5. That was the time. And
Yeah,
anyhow, it was fine.
that is yeah. That radio is a different beast for sure, especially, public radio like you mentioned similar to NPR and stuff. Like I've listened to a lot of those and yeah, usually those are pre-recorded though, I think.
Oh yeah,
They
what they'll do is they'll actually have the person read what they want to say. Like I believe NPR is like the worst of these. Like they once had Noam Chomsky on, and he later said they had him write out what he was going to say and then read it aloud as an answer, which is pretty insane in my opinion.
yeah,
Like I doubt the
that's
British do that.
yeah, that's not real radio to me anymore. That's
No.
just
No, and I mean
interviews.
this was a real interview, it was like she didn't know what I was gonna say. I mean, we did a
Right.
pre-interview, but she actually wanted to ask me about my game stuff because that's what else I'm into. And she's like, well, hey, that's great. I really want to ask you, but we never got to it because uh
Time.
the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Well, speaking of time, before we
Hmm.
meander too much on this topic, I would be remiss not to mention first off that I love Karen. Karen was a huge influence on me. I kind of came up in Pathfinder and then wandered into 5e, and then I discovered like both Cairn and Knave first editions at the
Mm,
same
mm.
time, and Cairn's principles really just like rewired my brain. Between the principles and the warden. I'm actually let me flip my book open. I have it right here, but uh, I wasn't super familiar with like what we would consider like old school kind of style play or emergent play and things like that. And just reading the concise bullet point nature of a lot of these really like unlocked something in my brain. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. So I had to say huge props for, just the principles section of Cairn. It's awesome.
Well, if you like bullet points, the 2E Warden's Guide, I basically have the same concept, but for other things like dungeon principles, forest principles, principles for faction, stuff like that. So like there are the same original principles for both the warden and the player, and then there are also principles for a bunch of different world building tools that are also in the Warden's Guide that I think
Mm,
um, I personally, I actually like them more than the original 1E principles. The 1E principles are basically unchanged and still exist in 2E, but um, the principles I came up with for dungeon design, for example, is like I spent, I'm not even kidding, like maybe 50 hours just distilling what people I respect have said about dungeon design and also my own
Wow.
personal experience, and just like thinking, okay, like what should, like, here's a principle, like an example would be um when you're having monsters fight, have the monsters talk to the players, stuff like that. Like, or problems in a dungeon should have multiple solutions, or put empty rooms in dungeons, stuff like that. Like, there should be someone interesting to talk to. Creatures in the dungeon should have goals and desires that are in tune with the theme of the dungeon. And they don't really have, they're not going to break anyone's brain, but if you actually follow them when you're making a dungeon using the Warden's Guide tools, you'll find, in my mind, a better dungeon in the end, because you'll have taken into, at least to some degree, you'll have absorbed some of the stuff that I have kind of distilled from the OSR as a whole. And again, these are all coming from other minds. I have like a master sheet of like I literally would just like watch a video of Chris McDowell or Ben Milton, or read Scribble's post or whatever. I'd read these different dungeon kind of geniuses and just break down what they're saying into pithy little statements that I could then put into a concise, non-repetitive form. And I'm really like, it was a really long project, and I got that out of the way like first, so I'm really glad. But yeah, if you like bullet points, there's a ton of those in the Warden's Guide.
Oh yeah, and definitely, and I'm definitely looking forward to my second edition copy. It hasn't arrived yet, but yeah, those principles, it really, like, I played a lot of organized play, like Pathfinder kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and when I started to GM, I was just watching stuff online. I had a totally different style and approach to gaming,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I read Karen, I was like, oh, this is what I'm missing. Like, these are the elements. Even stuff as simple as, like, giving, it sounds dumb, but when you're brand new, like giving information freely, making sure that
Right. Right.
everyone has a clear picture that you're painting, and not like to hold your cards too close to your chest and stuff like that. It was just like really profound stuff, like you said, written very pithy, like very quick, easy to absorb. And I really like, man, I latched on to those, and I'm better for it. I'm a better
Right.
game master
Right.
for it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I think the specifically in 2E, the dungeon exploration principles are really short, but they're just what you said. It's, provide information as if the players are as smart as they could possibly be. Uh, don't tell the players how their characters feel. Provide hints about what lays on, like, beyond the next corridor. Whether it's like a smell or a sound or whatever.
Yeah, that
Constantly
telegraphing
reiterate.
danger.
Yeah, telegraph danger, or whatever. Like, hey, if someone says I'm looking down the hallway, that costs them something. That costs them time, which is the currency of dungeon exploration. And Karen and in many OSR games, is just, I have a limited amount of actions and movement, and I need to spend them wisely. So in turn, when a character spends time to put their head out the door and look around the corner, give them something for that. It could be just the floor is slightly elevated here. It could be you smell a strange odor like smoke, something, even if you weren't planning it, because every action has a cost. And it's important to justify those actions, but also to reward wise activity. And I think looking out the door to try to figure out what's in the next room is in my opinion, a smart move that people don't do enough. But also, like, I think my favorite of all those is constantly restate, reiterate a
Mhm.
character's surroundings.
Yeah.
Where they are, what they can see, what objects are in the room, etc. Like, constantly, because people forget about that stuff. And to me, old school play is all about the physical space. It's all about exploring an extant environment and interacting with it directly. It's not about, using some meta currency like you'd find in a Powered by the Apocalypse game or something. And it's not about rolling like you would in 5e. What do I see with my eyes? Give me a
Yeah.
break. No, it's about exploring a physical surrounding, and so in turn you need to provide characters and their players with the most those characters can sense. And I think that to me is a more satisfying experience. Like, what is the point of secrets? It has
Yeah.
to be justified. A secret that's just there so that a dice roll can reveal it is not a good secret. It's a bad time. It's not real
Yeah.
interactivity.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, like one of the things that really just the first thing I read almost it was like, don't lock any of the information behind a roll or something like that. And I was just
Right,
like,
right.
oh yeah, like that totally tracks. What that makes so much sense. Why would you sort of like force this awkward interaction of play just because you believe it needs to be in there because game mechanics or something? But
Right.
yeah, all the stuff you're describing is stuff that like I remember at the time I was thinking like why is none of this in like a dungeon master's guide or like any of those sort of like how to play kind of books. It was just all the stuff I'd been looking for that I was like what
Yeah,
where's this
yeah.
been?
I will say so. It depends on which DMG you're talking about.
True,
And I know
true.
you're a Pathfinder guy, but I'm saying like in 5e, the DMG, which I read the DMG front to back when I first got it, and it's terrible. It doesn't tell you anything about actually making
Yeah.
dungeons.
Yeah.
And it's the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's pretty upsetting. The earlier versions of DMG were actually significantly better. That said, I think the focus of 5e play in particular, and like traditional games that are more popular than all these rinky-dink OSR games, those kinds of games are not emphasizing the same kind of play. You
Right.
could totally run an OSR game with 5e. There's nothing 5e. I mean, I've had multiple TPKs, both as a player and as a DM in 5e. There's nothing about the system that necessarily prevents it from being a good OSR game. There are things I don't like about it, like perception checks and stuff. But
Right.
on the other hand, you could totally run it in an OSR style. The problem is that the culture of play and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
conduit of training, the knowledge academy of D&D, which is the 3 books, the PHB and the Monster Manual and the DMG, they do nothing to help you play in an old school fashion, which means, emphasizing fiction over mechanics. It means rulings over rules. It means critical thinking and player ingenuity, all that stuff. They're just not concerned with that. So, of course, the environment, that the culture of 5e play is just not amenable to that sort of experience. So I don't want to knock 5e as a system, but I do think the cultural attitude behind it and the all-consuming present, the version of 5e that you mostly see, isn't really emphasizing these kinds of player experiences that yeah, I think you're totally right. It's like why don't they do that? I can't answer that question. I really can't. I
And
wish they would.
we're actually broaching a subject we naturally arrived at a place that I was kind of hoping we'd get to because this is such an interesting conversation to me as someone who kind of arrived in the hobby through Pathfinder and
Hmm.
then 5e. Like you said, I didn't look back at any of the old game masters guides because I was like, why would I? I have this brand new one right here in front of me I just bought. So it didn't occur to me really to like do a history lesson through this game I just had found, and I didn't understand really even what the OSR was, or really wasn't aware of it to be honest. And I think it was like after I found Cairn, I'm trying to remember how I found it. Maybe it was like a Professor
Bob the
Dungeon
World Builder.
Master. Maybe it was one of
That was
those.
a big one. That was a big one.
Yeah, one of those guys. It probably was Bob. But yeah, after I was like, whatever. This game's like what, $5? I bought it offline, and reading through it really did spark something in me where I was like, okay, there's like a total, yeah, like you said, a different culture of play happening here, even more so than like what the DMGs are telling you how to do. There was a different approach to gaming, which I found really fascinating, and that was like my gateway into all this. Which, you know, I think highlighting this more would be beneficial to the larger community because I think a lot of people get caught up on this idea of old school versus new, and they don't learn the lessons that old school style play can end up teaching you, and therefore like the sort of fun you can derive at the table by this different approach to gaming.
Yeah, I do think that there are some universal attitudes prevalent in the OSR that apply to modern, traditional games. They apply to older systems that aren't necessarily D&D. They apply to story games. Like one, for example, that I think is, for me, creates a better experience no matter what game I'm playing, is fiction over rules.
Mm,
If something, sometimes it's called the rule of cool, right? If something just seems cool, forget the rules for a minute. The rules are there to help us make a decision, but ultimately, when we're having a conversation at the table, we're trying to have a good time. So whatever the good time is for everyone together, that's what should take precedence. Like, you know, the narrative and the fiction over the mechanics, I think that tends to get sticky for folks who are really concerned with the mechanics and that is the game to them, and that's totally cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with people who enjoy knowing the minutia of these mechanics and rules. I don't actually think most people like it. I think a lot of people, the rules
Y-
provide a scaffolding that helps them, right? But it's not the reason they're playing.
You've
Not
never been
everyone's a
to
rules lawyer.
Pathfinder Society, and it
Yeah.
shows.
Well, no. Pathfinder. So what's fascinating about Pathfinder is that you got 4 pages for your 2E a character sheet, right? You guys are Pathfinder is it's like those folks know exactly what they want, which is like
Yeah,
great, you know. But I think many 5E people play it because that's just D&D to them. You know,
right.
I feel like Pathfinder folks, it's rare for folks to do what you did, which is to start with Pathfinder. I think people get into D&D because they heard the word D&D. I mean, there's so much, uh, not attrition, what's the word? Entropy associated with
Yeah,
D&D. It's
yeah,
what everyone knows. It's just the reason people buy Coke. They know what Coke
right.
is, you know? And
Yeah,
and I'm not in any way denigrating people who play 5e. I'm just saying a lot of folks who play 5e don't actually care what it is. If I were to bring someone to play an RPG and just told them it was D&D and they'd never played 5e before, and I just played, I don't know, Knave, I don't think they would actually know a difference. I think
yeah,
that most people would think, hey, that was great. You know, what they got, what they were expecting. They don't need to know the minutia. Now, of course, there are folks who want to rules lawyer or who enjoy knowing the, you know, how to make a perfect build, and that's a completely legitimate playstyle. It isn't mine, and I think there are folks like you who come in, they might like some of the math, they like the experience, but they're not quite sure where they land on the kind of play style they prefer. Maybe they don't even know that there's an option, right? And then
yeah,
they come across something like Knave or OSE or Cairn or Shadow Dark or any of these games, and it like breaks their brain because no, and it happened to me too. It like literally, I remember, you know, I've been playing RPGs for a really long time, and I had moved over a bit from the story games world, started to play more old school games, and then I remember reading Into the Odd, and I had to like put it down. Like I had
mm,
to like put it down and just sort of sit and stare because there was a fundamental simplicity to it that still achieved what I wanted in a way I would never have thought about, that just kind of cracked open a whole new world. And you know, Karen is based on Into the Odd and Knave. That's what it's rooted in. Second edition has a lot of my own stuff in it that's much more independent of those two games, but legitimately those two games just showed me that what I wanted could be achieved in a way that um, was so much more minimal than I ever thought I needed. And so like Pathfinder in many ways achieves the goals of its creators, and I think that's wonderful.
yeah,
It's not going to give me the kind of play experience that I want,
right.
but a
You
game
know,
like Knave will, you know.
yeah, and you're 1,000% right though. Like that was my journey. You basically just described it. I mean, I don't know what it was. Actually, I do know what it was. I walked in the store. There was a literal divide section. It was like Pathfinder books on the left, D&D books on the right. And I asked the guy, I was like, "Why would I pick Pathfinder over D&D?" And D? And he just goes, "Ah, there's just more bells and whistles." And so I was like,
And
"Oh,
if
okay."
and if
There's
yeah, and if that's what you want, more power to you. I think Paizo is a wonderful company. I think Pathfinder are, you know, it's doing what third edition and 3.5 wanted to do in a way that I think is probably better than how they ever did. Wonderful. It is not an enjoyable experience to me. It's just and that's totally like, just as I'm okay with other folks playing that game and enjoying themselves, you know, I would hope that they're okay with me playing my other, you know, other kinds of role playing games. And I
yeah,
think,
exactly.
um, I think there is more of that acceptance now than there was when I first got into the game, for sure. You know, there was when I first started playing old school games. If I wanted to deviate from BX at all, even, you know, moving away from OSE to something else like the Black Hack, people would really give me a hard time about it and not call it not OSR. But I think that definition has changed, and I'm really grateful for the place the community is in today. You know, it's much more accepting than it used to be, or at least in the spaces that I hang out in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and just to touch on one other thing that you said, that eye-opening moment that you had with Into the Odd, was Cairn for me. You know, I opened it up and I went, oh, you can do it with just this. Like the thing I've been doing. Like I don't need all these extra feats and whatever, and all the extra math like you were saying about Pathfinder. I just looked at it and I went, okay. It like clicked in my brain. I was like, there's still story here. There's still characters. There's still the tropes and things. It's a little bit more DIY, but it's there. Like the mechanics are really distilled down into the core experience. And that was when I was like, okay, I'm gonna check out all these other games I've been missing out on because they weren't D&D or Pathfinder. And
And
that,
it's the best compliment you can give me, because it showed you a path forward. And even if you end up finding Shadow Dark as your game of play or whatever, that to me is like, that was my goal. That was it right there. It's
yeah,
just to, Into the Odd is industrial. It's not a fantasy game, and it didn't have rules for magic, and it didn't have some of the more story gamey kind of principles, like putting literally in the beginning of the game an agenda, like fiction first, and the game is about that lethality and player trait. Like, it didn't have that. So I thought, okay, well, how can I take 99% of Into the Odd, tweak it a bit so it can do magic the way I think is best, add the character generation of Knave, and then put on my story gamey kind of agenda, principles, whatever. Oh, here's the result, and I'm going to make it free. And now people who find it will say, oh yeah, the print version, as you said, is $5, but it's free to download online or read on the website. So folks who just stumble upon it will say, at the very least, this is something I didn't know about. Let's see what else is out there. That to me is like, that's what I wanted.
yeah.
So
Well,
great,
you've
great, good job.
succeeded. You've succeeded with at least one random guy on the internet. So,
Yeah.
congrats. Yeah, and just want to say too, I love the spell system in Cairn. It's one of my favorites. The spells are so fun. It's so often when you come from a game like 5e or Pathfinder, it's all about like gotta optimize, gotta take that fireball at level 3 kind of
Right,
thing. So
right,
it just that too was like another clicking moment in my brain where I was like, oh, this is so cool. There's so
right.
much utility,
So
narrative use here.
Right, so the spell books themselves are mostly ported over from Knave with some adjustments.
Right.
The main thing that I gave it is I made it so that when you cast a spell, you don't roll, you just read from the book and the spell is cast. And then what I added to that mechanic was, when you cast a spell, it fills a slot of inventory with fatigue. So if you start casting spells, you get more and more fatigue. The idea there was trying to explain why wizards didn't wear armor is
Mhm.
because they needed to cast a lot of spells, and armor
Yeah.
takes up inventory. So it was kind of like a cute way of explaining why a wizard would have a bunch of people carrying books around for him, and then also, can cast maybe 9 spells a day or 10 spells a day. That's it.
Yeah. I
And then
love it.
I wanted to justify that. And so that was kind of, in the first game at least, that was probably the main original mechanic that I added to the Knave and Into the Odd rules that I cobbled together. Second edition has a couple other new things that I came up with in the same spirit, but generally speaking, the magic system was mine, which I'm very proud of. And I actually worked with like a bunch of different solutions first, trying to like make it subtract from HP and other things. And I'm really happy where it ended up, because it's worked really well. And now almost 1,000 games or whatever I've run, the fact that people can just cast a spell without having to roll for it, but also
Yeah.
the cost is fatigue, has really helped create the kind of playstyle that I'm trying to create, which is cautious, critical thinking, using anything you have in an ingenious way. I've seen people in many games, like I played a Maze Rats game once, where the players created a Rube Goldberg machine, basically, to try to like trap this powerful monster, and they were able to do it. One of them died, but the other two survived because they rigged up this ridiculous Rube Goldberg machine made from items they had in their inventory. That kind of stuff, just
Yeah.
it can
That's
it can happen in 5e. It just doesn't happen naturally. It's not encouraged.
Well, it, not to get too deep in the paint here, but in a lot of ways, it's because so many of the mechanics in a game like 5e are already doing a lot of the heavy lifting, like critically thinking wise, because they just give you the solution usually, like in a spell or ability or skill or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a really great magic system, and obviously so because I'm pretty sure Knave 2 just took it whole cloth, right? Am I remembering that
Uh,
right?
so Nave 2, what Ben did with Nave 2, and I actually think this is probably predates what I was doing because it's ports over some of his. He had a game between Nave 1 and 2 called Maze Knights that never went anywhere. And one of the mechanics
Mm,
from Maze Knights involved turning wounds into inventory, which I mean, yes, it's similar to the fatigue mechanic in Cairn, but I actually don't think that's where he got it from. I think he
okay.
was looking at a lot of different sources. Nave 2e has a lot of differences from Nave 1e. Some I like, some I don't like, but the wounds mechanic is very similar. It's like if you get hurt beyond a certain point, you take a wound which fills inventory, which is very cool. Like it could totally
Yeah.
do that in Care and it would work fine. But we're also all pulling from each other or from the general ether.
Right.
I remember when Chris McDowell, who created Into the Odd, when he was putting out his playtest copies of his latest game, Mythic Bastionland, which is a sort of Arthurian fantasy game. I noticed the way he was doing wilderness exploration was very similar to the procedures I had created for Karen Second Edition. And I reached out to him because we're pals, and I said, "Yo, you're doing just what I'm doing. That's so funny." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have read it." And I was like, "No, no, no. First off, I'm 100% sure you didn't see my version. We're just on the same page, and you're just
Yeah.
doing." And actually, his result is a little bit different from mine. Mine's point crawl based. His is hex crawl based. But it was just interesting that we were both kind of arriving at the same conclusions without having talked to each other because there's all these ideas out there and we're all kind of pulling from a sort of folk RPG experience. So I try not to think so much about who owes what to whom and whatnot, and more just like, give credit where it's due. But these ideas have all appeared in a million places. Even
Right.
Chris
And there's
McDowell's great, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's only so many ways to skin a cat, right? Like,
Indeed,
eventually
indeed,
you're gonna
indeed.
kind of arrive in the same areas.
Like, oh, does your game have stats? How many? 3, 4,
Yeah.
6, 9? It's like you are going to have some similar, but that's kind of the idea. And I think this is an area of concern a lot of folks who run into games like Karen have, where their issue is, look, the old games and the new games are more compatible with what's already out there or what I'm familiar with. We have 6
Yeah.
stats. Karen has 3 stats. That's weird. Stuff like that. And I think what folks don't understand is that the actual mechanics don't matter that much. It's the mechanics that do exist. Do they further the same experience of play? Like, I don't
Right.
care if you make a game for Old School Essentials or Shadow Dark. I can, on my own, write original attributes for a monster. Or look, and I already have one on the website, whatever. The actual stats don't matter. What matters is the module or adventure designed in such a way that it delivers the same kind of experience that I'm looking for in an old school game, which again is a focus on player agency, exploration, discovery, teamwork, critical thinking, lethality, all that stuff. Like, does it give me 70% of those things? And if it does, then to me, it's old school and I can play it in the preferred style with my system. And I'm not so worried about compatibility as I think some folks seem to be. And the nice
Yeah.
thing is, as Karen's gotten more popular, now there's over 70 adventures for it. So folks are now saying, well, is this Karen compatible? Or, you know, Chris McDowell texted me a screenshot the other day of someone on some Discord server incorrectly identifying a mechanic as derived from Cairn, even literally a mechanic in Into the Odd derived from Cairn, which is the opposite. It's the and he sent me like a
Uh,
sad face, and I said, I don't know, I'm sorry. It's just people want fantasy. What do you want from me?
yeah, I hate to say it,
So
but I've probably done that. It might have even been me. I
no,
don't know.
yeah, I mean it's pretty. Into the Odd is known for a
Uh,
few things. I think the number one thing it's known for is auto hit. You roll
mm,
to you don't roll to see if you succeed. You just roll damage on an opponent. That's not even original to the Into the Odd. It came from a blog called BX Black Razor, which is still out there. That was a blog post where the author was making the argument for why we should get rid of 2 hit rolls. And
yeah.
at some point, Chris saw that and figured out a good way to work it out in his own OD&D hack, which is where the word Into the Odd comes from. It's into the ODD, into the OD&D. It was originally meant to be a Searchers of the Unknown OD&D style hack that eventually went its own way. But I think folks focus a little too much on derivative works and should maybe think more about how this is an extremely collaborative hobby. I mean, it's like when you have folk musicians in the 70s all playing each other's songs, it can get a little confusing who started what. And I understand that there's like good reason to give people credit where it's due, especially when it comes to like appropriation or whatever. But on the other hand, that's just how you collaborate sometimes. That's just jazz, it's just
Yeah.
playing together. And I think most of us in the scene who actually put stuff out don't really care about it. We just want to, give credit where it's due and just acknowledge that this is a folk movement where we all share our cool little innovations, because at the end of the day, this is a rule. You can just change it. You can just make your own damn thing. It's so easy.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a great way to put it too. Is it's jazz, baby. We're all making music here, and whenever I eventually write my own game and I steal your magic system whole cloth, I'll just
Damn straight.
cite this
Yeah.
conversation. So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
right.
but yeah, you said earlier something. You said talking about like different adventures and like what's compatible and all that stuff. I kind of laughed because it's something I'm always kind of preaching on my channel. Is like I don't really care so much about the stats of an adventure. Is the adventure fun? Is the adventure good? Does the adventure raise interesting questions and things like that? I've been called out several times because I will I did a review of the new monster manual, for instance, and one of the things I said in it, I was like, this just isn't the book for me because I don't need this book to make the stats, right? Like I know enough about 5e that if I want to play it, I can come up with the monster stats myself. What I want is like the interesting, juicy bits about these monsters that spark my imagination, my creativity, really evoke inspiration and stuff like that. But yeah, it's
Totally. And that's why that, you called that video, "Who is this monster manual for?" or whatever.
yeah,
It's so true. On the other hand, the Monster Overhaul by Skirples, which came out last year, is freaking brilliant. Even though it has all these monsters you recognize, it adds stuff to them that is so gameable. It's
yeah,
it's actually inspirational and useful. I love it. So I feel like you don't need the stats. You don't, and I don't even remember if it has stats. I think it might, but the main thing about the Monster Overhaul is it just really thinks about how monsters are perceived and what makes them interesting. Like it has like what might happen if you eat them. It has um uh what their natural
the
habits are, stuff like that. And it's not useless. It's stuff that is totally gameable.
right, yeah, the sheer number of tables to inspire one specific set of monsters is just it's insane. Like I think in that video I go through the example of goblins because why not? And it's just so many things like how their bosses operate. What kind of strange contraptions they're trying to fire at the players. Yeah, I could talk all day about that book. I think it's
Yeah, the
the
goblins. Yeah, the goblin section is like, there's like, what are they doing? Is like a D20 table, and it's
yeah,
like one's like making poison, the other is like arguing, the other is like sleeping, but in a giant pile.
yeah,
I think all that stuff is totally useful and gameable, and I actually don't think traditional gamers even know that fun tables exist. They're not. It's just not focused. Like they're not. There's not that much in the trad world. There's not as much of a focus on random tables, and I think the
mhm,
OSR is like 70% random tables. Like I will buy a book that's just random tables. That's all it is, and I don't intend any other. I'll buy a book I'll buy a system that I'm never gonna play because the random tables in it are just like perfect for city generation or whatever.
oh yeah, yeah. Any of the worlds without numbers, whatever those.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's
Those what are they called? The tome? Is it the tome? No, it's the what is the? There is like
books
there's
without
the
numbers. I don't know.
no, there's a Stars Without Number has really good tables, and then there's World Without Number book, whatever. But the Tome of Adventure Design, that's the other one that
Oh
Matt
yeah,
Finch made. And I tried to sort of like emulate that a little bit in the Karen Warden's Guide. I only had 200 pages to work with, but there's a bunch of tables in there that are specifically designed to quickly generate interesting results for dungeon rooms, forest clearings, settlements, weird things you might come across in a setting. And if I'd had my way, I would have written a whole other book of just those tables because it's hard to write good tables. And I limited myself to basically 2d20 tables per whatever we're talking about. 2d20
yeah.
traps. One is the kind of trap, and the other is what triggers it, for example. And I just love tables. So
Yeah, I just had Ben Milton on, and I was praising Knave 2 for its tables. And I was saying, like, anytime I go somewhere, Knave 2 is the first book that I put in my backpack because it's just going to be useful at some point when I'm running an adventure. Whatever that point is, it
Yeah, that was
changes
me
game to
for
game.
Maze Rats until pretty recently. I always had a copy of Maze Rats with me, which was originally Ben Milton's Into the Odd Hack. He then
Mm.
changed the mechanics quite a bit, but it did start as an Into the Odd Hack. And Maze Rats has such good tables for looting bodies and creating spells and all that. Some of which you can find in Ave too. But I mean, if I were you, I would add Maze Rats to that just because it's tiny and has such good little tables in it.
Yeah, I definitely will. And the thing I think people don't realize about tables too is, the way I see it is like they're really great for the thing that you don't like to prepare or you don't have like a lot of inspiration on. Like the well kind of runs dry after a while when you've been running games for years. You're like, it's always going to be a necromancer in a crypt. How can I shake that up? What can I throw in there that's different? And that's where like I think tables really shine to me is I can take a book like Knave, can roll a couple times, I can come up with a really interesting, whatever big bad magic item, you name it, whatever's special in that room, that kind of thing. So yeah, I love to have a book like that on hand just to inspire me and shake things up, do something a little different every once in a while.
So let's try something here. There is a monster generator in the Cairn Second Edition Warden's Guide, and you can also access like these tools online. But I'm gonna roll a monster up using this generator. Okay.
Let's do it.
Um, okay. All right. So it's a custom monster. Its physique is that it is glowing, so it glows. Its main feature is that it has scales. The quirk about it is that it speaks only in rhymes. Its weakness is for prepared meals. It's really,
Mm.
really weak. It really desires prepared meals. The form of attack it takes is it slams. It could either mean it slams things into you or slams you into things. I don't know. Its critical damage is that it incapacitates its target. Its primary ability is that it manipulates, and the thing it targets is emotions. So we have a scaly, glowing creature that speaks in rhymes, has a fondness for prepared meals, hurts people by slamming them into the ground, I'm assuming, or slamming something into them. Maybe it slams its tail into them, which of course incapacitates them. And its primary ability is to manipulate a person's emotions. I'm thinking of a like serpent naga kind of creature, but that's an
Mm.
example of the monster generation in Karen Second Edition. And I so much prefer this monster over one from a bestiary because my players have no idea what it is when I say, okay, this like slithery, scaly creature comes out of the ground and it's glowing and
And then I
it
go, oh,
says,
it's a basilisk.
but then it starts speaking in rhymes,
Yeah.
and it turns one of the characters against you, maybe a hireling or something. This is an example of a custom monster. But I
Yeah.
I I just love those kinds of randomly rolled creatures, encounters, whatever, so much more than just a simple bestiary. Now, if you gave me a monster and then created a unique situation like an ogre that's obsessed with its self-image or something, I'd like that too. But um, I just find these random tables so much more interesting.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I threw in that joke there because, to say like if you've ever played whatever D&D Pathfinder, lots of times the players like try to guess the monster, right? Immediately they're like, "Oh, we fought basilisks before. We know what this is. We're gonna, whatever, avert our eyes and run in with our swords or all that kind of stuff." So yeah, it's really fun to just shake it up with random tables, whether it's Cairn 2 or like we were saying, Skirples is why can't I remember the name of it? Monster Overhaul.
The monster overall, right? Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just yeah, it's that kind of stuff that I think really generates emergent play because people stop thinking about it as like the game and then they start acting in character or not even in character but like trying to solve the problem in front of them instead of look at their stats and go like, oh, it's a basilisk, I'll get out my basilisk sling sword or whatever. And yeah, I love that. That's 100% the style I've started to adopt as I've shifted to more like OSR style games.
Yeah, I mean it's I can't imagine, playing Mines of Fendelver today. It's like one of those goblins. you're talking about goblins right now, unless you can make them really interesting, which people knock on that module, but I actually think it's a decent starting module for that system.
Oh yeah,
But I don't, I would change a lot.
yeah, yeah. Well, we are actually coming up on time here. I think it's been it probably longer than actually we slotted away. But I just want to say thanks for being here, Yohari. This has been awesome. It's great to have you. Appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. And
Thanks
yeah,
for having me.
yeah,
Anytime. I mean,
absolutely.
it's as you can see, I can talk about this a lot.
Yeah,
I
same.
on my podcast, Between Two Karens, we mostly review modules, but we frequently get sidetracked in un unrelated BS. So this is actually a more focused conversation about OSR that I've had in a long time, even though I do an OSR podcast every week.
That's hilarious. It's hilarious, one, because I didn't even pick a topic when we started, and two, because your podcast is about usually adventures and stuff like that. So it
Indeed,
feels pretty
indeed.
focused to me. But
Well, we don't talk about theory as much. We get questions about it, but we don't
mm,
focus on, hey, what even is the OSR? Because the assumption is people listening are, as OSR pilled or OSR heads as much as we are, and I think that's an incorrect assumption actually, because I found many people who don't even like OSR games who listen, and I'm always very surprised.
yeah, and by the way, if you're listening, you haven't checked out Between Two Karens, definitely go check it out. It's an awesome podcast. It's honestly like how I've discovered a lot of the adventures that I'm more interested in these days. And it's a lot of fun. I could listen to you guys. You have a great rapport. I could just listen to you guys talk about anything,
Well,
to
yeah,
be
in
honest.
fact, yeah, for folks who don't know, my co-host Brad Kerr is a very well-respected OSR adventure designer, and his adventures are honestly very good. I think if folks are starting the OSR today, there's probably a slot of 20 or so modules. I would say, hey, go through these first if you were looking for good modules. And Brad's would be like 4 of them. So, and that's not because he's my friend. I'm saying this against my better judgment. He's a very good adventure designer. And
Yeah,
and
I've
our
got a few of them.
podcast, yeah, Wyvern Songs. Oh God, I'm saying it like him now. Wyvern Songs is his most popular. It's 3 different adventures, and it's a really good deal if you can find it on drive through. I will say the podcast, despite being called Between Two Karens, has nothing to do with Karen. It's just a funny name. That's all. It has nothing to do with the game Karen. We've
Is it?
actually only ever reviewed one Karen module ever. So
Did you get it from Between Two Ferns?
indeed we did.
Okay, yeah. I
It
used
was
to
too
watch that.
good. When Brad suggested it, I was like, shit, that's too good. We have to do it. We just have to
Oh,
do it now.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you've got anything else that's going on, we just shouted out your podcast, but anything new that you want to shout out before we
Well,
log
yeah.
off?
So Karen's Second Edition is presently shipping the backers. We started in March and we had a lot. We ordered 7,000 books and it's just taking a long time to get to people, but it is on schedule. We thought we'd start shipping in March of 2025 and we did exactly that. The Warden's Guide, which is included in the box set, will be available in next month, May, probably mid-May or so. Print at cost on Amazon, Lulu, drive through all those places. I actually have all that stuff set up and ready to go. I'm just waiting for the go ahead because I don't want to start shipping it before folks who actually order the box have got it. And then the
Right.
box set, of course, will be available to buy as well. But the specifically the 2 main books, the Player's Guide and the Warden's Guide, will both be available for free online and also print on demand starting soon. The Warden's Guide is actually available right now for download from the website, which is KarenRPG.com. You can also read the entirety of the rules online. It's Creative Commons licensed, so you can hack it, whatever you want. I've also got a couple adventures out. There's one that comes with the box set, which is Trouble in Twin Lakes, and another called Rise of the Blood Olms. They're both, in my opinion, very OSR-y adventures, and they're, of course, free and purchasable at cost. And I also have a much longer and more expensive and much higher quality adventure called Beyond the Pale, which is a 100-page OSR setting and adventure with 2 dungeons set in a Jewish mythology set environ. It's extremely personal to me. Wonderful module in my opinion. So folks are interested, they can get that through the Lost Pages website, which is the publisher that prints the book. Again, that's called Beyond the Pale. And then finally, as we mentioned earlier, my podcast is called Between Two Karens, and we have a Patreon. Our regular episodes are ad-free, as of course are so are our Patreon ones. But we don't do any ads. We are fully funded by patrons, but anyone can listen to our main episodes. The Patreon mostly gives you bonus episodes where you do hear Brad and I wax philosophy. I don't know how you say it. We talk a lot about OSR stuff.
Philosophically.
Wax philosophically or I feel like so. I'm getting that wrong. Anyhow, yeah. So again, my name is Yochai. You can find me on various places, but like Yochai Gall, HIO drive through. You'll find me. Oh, my blog is newschoolrevolution.com. I blog only a couple times a year, but I got stuff up there about point crawls and emergent growth and narrative and all that crap. So if you're interested in reading the text version of what you're hearing, go to my blog, New School Revolution. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just second you there. That it's an awesome blog, and even if you're not going to play Cairn 2 or whatever, go check out the Warden's Guide, because I dare to say it's one of the better game master guides out there, regardless of what system you're playing. So go pick it up, go check out his stuff. It's awesome.
And most of the stuff in there is honestly modular. You can choose to not use it. You can port it over to your own system quite easily. And there's a lot of just sort of setting design that is exportable. There's tables that you could roll for a setting no matter what system you're using. And there's also a whole section on the setting itself, which is the kind of native setting to Cairn called Vald, which, I don't know why you would want to play in that if you weren't playing Cairn, but you could still actually have some fun with it. It's kind of cool and weird. So check it out. It's, again, free, CairnRPG.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on here. And that's it for this episode, everybody. We'll see you next time in the dungeon, no matter what choices you make. Coming this June is Crit, community-run Infinite Tabletop, a free online community-led event where you can play different tabletop role-playing games with other members of the TTRPG community. Click here or go to tabletop.events for more information, and look out for my games, which I'll be running as well. Running through a dungeon, you come across the junction. You gotta go left or right. It doesn't matter what you choose, 'cause either way you lose. There's a Quantum Ogre just out of sight. And now it's coming to a head, the very thing you dread. You get ready for the coming fight. Your spells are waning fast, you hit them with your blast. It's the last flickering light. Quantum Ogre Cast, Quantum Ogre Cast, Quantum Ogre Cast, Quantum Ogre Cast.